Today we're going to talk about some documents that I got from the FBI's website in relation to the now deceased writer, political activist named Edward Abbey. So you may have seen in a previous video where I submitted the FOIA request for his records, and I didn't know if I'd ever get anything back. Well, I did. And we're going to look at those documents today. I'll give you a little spoiler, and you can just click the forward arrow a couple times on your keyboard if you don't want to hear the spoiler. What I found in these documents was not what I expected. I expected that there would be information related to the FBI investigating him because he would be suspected of leading an eco-terrorism organization, I guess, or project, which I don't advocate for. I want to be crystal clear on this. I'm looking at this through a historical lens of a deceased nature writer and environmental philosopher. Instead, what I found were investigations stemming way back to the late 1940s when he was a university student. And they're related to him being suspected as a member of the Communist Party and his views on the war movement and conscription. So here are the documents. This is the cover sheet from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I have about 150 pages here that I'm going to go through in the next 20 to 30 minutes or so. I'm not going to read them line for line. I'm just going to scan, highlight, and talk about some key pieces of information. So the dossier they have on him started March 8th, 1947, when Edward Abbey posted this letter to all students and faculty holding draft cards. And he talks about the next day being the anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birthday, and he's instructing people to publicly rid themselves of their draft cards by burning them or mailing them to the president. So a little background: Edward Abbey served in the military for 2 years in Italy until I want to say early 1947. It could have been 1946 though. At the end of the war, he was brought home, so that was the end of his service. So when he posted this, he was then suspected, he signed it, of, and we can see this Thoreau quote. Thoreau said, "It's not too soon for an honest man to rebel." So by doing this, he made himself a suspect of sedition, which is a crime. And as the Cold War started to become a thing, he was considered a person who could possibly be a communist, which was a much bigger deal back then than it is, I would say, now in modern times. So you can see the copies of these records. The original copies were destroyed in 1961. And here we go. We got a lot of redacted stuff here, but this is another, this looks like an interview from the Pittsburgh Bureau of the FBI of someone who knows Edward Abbey. And so this is this person describing that Edward Abbey hates all things military, and that this could be a possible violation of the sedition law. So this is quite an interesting thing to see the FBI investigating in the wake of more contemporary political events where, like on January 6th, 2021, was it? You had groups of people, trying to overthrow an election, and how that's also considered sedition. So these are very different things, and yet the crime is the being a suspect of the crime is the same. So here's another primary document where we have the subject's name. Looking at the next page, we just kind of have categorize of what this guy's done professionally. So his employment, his military service, where he's at, whether he has a criminal record, which he doesn't. And here's another printout of the letter he posted. Which is under miscellaneous in this file. So he was at the State Teachers College in Indiana, and this was in March 1947. So, basically his first college experience, he was being investigated by the FBI, which, if you know Abbey on a surface level, you're probably thinking the Money Wrench Gange, Desert Solitaire. You're not thinking of this like college student who's, creating his own individualistic anti-war movement and subsequently being investigated by the FBI for that. So here's another document dated September 1953, also from the Pittsburgh Bureau, January 1953. Can't really see much on this document. Here we can see a declassification date of October 2nd, 1981. And we see a business address from University of New Mexico, where in 1953 Edward Abbey was probably working on his master's degree there. And then there's a list of categories this could fall into. Individual has been subject of a communist index card. None of those are checked. So then we have a synopsis of facts here on this page from May 20th, 1953. And we can see that this investigation goes on. So in this case, he's wrote another thing that's offended people in the literary publication for the state college. In which he writes, "Man will never be free until the last king is strangled with the entrails of the last priest." So he's in hot water again, and once again we have a page that kind of shows who he is, where he's at. So citizenship status, his education, marital status. At this point he is married. Edward Abbey got married and divorced several times, so that's going to change as the FBI investigates him. We can see more information about where he was at, where he was going. So this goes further back to July 19th, 1944, which looks as his earliest known employment at a packing company in Oakdale, California, of all places. He was a typist at the Geological Survey, and then started the University of Mexico. One of the things I find ironic about Edward Abbey is, as much as he hates government, he didn't seem to mind working for the government. And he is a man that's full of ironies. So, and his views are subject to that. In this case, he's he's suspected of being a communist for his behaviors, and then the people they interview are like, he's just kind of out there, we he likes the United States. He just doesn't have the typical view of the government. So here we go, March 14th, 1951. Issue of the New Mexico Daily Lobo, a publication at the University of New Mexico. He writes a letter to the editor, and he's talking about how this Cold War is heating up, and that it is the essence of wrongness of war, searching, and how important it is to search for an alternative. And so there's 16 other people here, including his wife, who was also anti-war at the time, so that's interesting. And all those names besides her are redacted. So I'm guessing all those people had dossiers on themselves, and those may or may not have been declassified at the time of this recording. So this is about this Thunderbird, which is the name of a literary publication for the college as well. And this person's being interviewed about who Edward Abbey is, and he writes that this was a rash and immature choice, especially from a man who, in this person's view, who's being interviewed by the FBI, is intelligent and capable. So he's basically categorizing Edward Abbey as an irresponsible. And he's but what's interesting here is that, people tried to dissuade him from writing these things, publishing these things, and he wouldn't be dissuaded. And this part goes into that being listed as due to his ego, basically. The camera's a little blurry in this shot, which is not ideal. I'm going to link these documents in a Google Drive folder so you can download them yourself if you want to read them. And you can, of course, get them from the FBI's website if you search for Edward Abbey's name in the document repository they got there. So here's a line that says, "No doubt Mr. Abbey's loyalty to the United States." Emphatically, in other words. So these are very intelligent and well-spoken scholars in this college community that are being interviewed by an FBI agent and letting them know that Edward Abbey's intelligent. He's, look at this. He asserted that the subject was a brilliant individual, definite possibilities in creative writing, who was a credible student at the university. So he's a smart guy, he's a good guy, he just writes some controversial stuff and publishes it. So another really interesting point. And ultimately, I think this is kind of Edward Abbey's saving grace, is that, if the people who were reading his work, who were being interviewed by the FBI, were like, yes, this guy is anti-American, he's an absolute communist, this is sedition, this is communism, there may have been more of an effort to categorize this as a crime and prosecute it accordingly. And I think because the people in the academic community saw him as smart and pro-American with just different views, that may have contributed to him, staying out of prison or being formally prosecuted for a crime such as sedition, or all the ways they prosecuted people who were accused of being communist during the Cold War era of the United States. So here we see in this paragraph, spring 1951, there was a peace movement on campus. And all the individuals in that peace movement were pacifists, and Edward Abbey included himself among them. Another quotation of extreme bad judgment. I wonder if the FBI has files on everybody to this day that's holds pacifist anti-war views, or if that is something that dropped off after the Cold War. It's hard to say. So here we go, another interview. An exceptionally brilliant individual who graduated with honors at the University of New Mexico. He was individualist in his thinking in all respects. So, Edward Abbey wanted to be and was seen as someone who wanted to be. Oh, last paragraph there talks about him taking a Fulbright scholarship to attend universities overseas. He wanted to be seen as an individual leader, not a follower in any ways. And I think that's another thing that kind of helped him. But he wanted everybody to be their own individuals. So here we can see that he's continuing in his education journey to Scotland. They're definitely monitoring this. They know his marriage is falling apart, and that he's getting divorced. Lots of redactions on this page. A little bit of information on a novel he's writing. So, at this point, the FBI is asking people they're interviewing about Edward Abbey what he's writing about. So he's talking about his book, Jonathan Troy. Now we jump into another file of records from the FBI's website, which starts with signatures from Edward Abbey, so that they have copies of what those look like. This is dated November 3rd, 1952, from the Pittsburgh Bureau. So the FBI has offices in a few places, and the subject of this dossier is loyalty of a government employee. So here's another copy of the burn your draft card letter, and that looks like a photograph of the original copy that he typed up on a typewriter, and it's just a better quality, so not a transcribed one. So what we're seeing here is what the Pittsburgh Bureau's file on the FBI looked like, and how that's different from the Albuquerque's Bureau. At least that's what I think. So each bureau had their own copy of records, and then we have another one from the Washington, D.C. office. So another document talking about his divorce. FBI has redacted all the names of the people who were interviewed. If you're one of the people who are interviewed and you're watching this, you should absolutely comment below what that was like for you and how your views have changed or stayed the same. So he's categorized as a philosophy writer. They talk about his anti-American views, pulling files from the passport division, and talking with folks in Europe. More redacted pages. So this is declassified October 2nd, 1981 or 91. It's hard to tell. So we're just going to move through these more clerical pages. Loyalty is loyalty of government employees. So if you work for the government and you write like Edward Abbey, you're going to get investigated by the FBI. So here's the results of the investigation. Just kind of blown by that. United States Department of Justice. And this is, really interesting, the teletype from the Bureau. So the FBI was using teletype machines in the 50s. I won't go into detail about that technology now, but it's a precursor to the fax machine. So this was urgent. Edward Paul Abbey, Department of Interior. So it talks about I'm going to the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, September of 51. Here's another copy of the bulletin board post that started it all. Kind of blow through that. So in all these files, there's lots of copies of the same stuff that could be used to build a case against this person and justify their reason for investigating him. So this one's from October 10th. Another copy of the letter encouraging. Here's a personal history, which is pretty well detailed, but a lot of that's review at this point, so we're going to blow by these documents because we've seen them before. Other looks like the passport division looked at these records before issuing him a passport. I can't actually tell if that's what happened. I hypothesize that, but if you're reading those and you think why, if they would consult with the FBI before issuing him a passport, put that information in the comments below. So this is June 6, 1952, and he attended a conference entitled International Children in Defense of International Children that other communist people attended. This was in Europe, so that was another thing that the FBI was potentially concerned about. And here we get into our last batch of records. So this is a person that he worked with at a government office, and they gave a very government interview. I find that interesting. Sounds like that person may or may not have been interviewed by the FBI before. Another thing where he's categorized as a defiant individualist. Student who was born January 29th, 1927. Kind of moving a little faster here. I mean, we got 150 pages of documents. A lot of these are the same copies, just in different files at different offices. So I'm just looking for keywords that help feed the story here a little bit more. And looking for anything we may have overlooked in the other files. I can barely read any of this stuff, but it's more history. This page is basically fully redacted. Another this talks about how if they were to prevent him from doing government work, that he wouldn't be able to support himself as an author. So another irony right here that this person being interviewed kind of points out is that, like, Edward Abbey has all these problems with the government, but the government's he's dependent on the government to support his writing, which he hasn't made any money on yet. So they're like, hey, you should just let him let him work for the government, so that, whether that's for the Department of the Interior as like a ranger, or a typist, that way he can continue to write and not be wrongfully maligned. So this person is definitely in his corner. And then they talk about how he could be categorized as a liberal Democrat, and that he's definitely loyal to the country. He just has different views than these, government organizations that are investigating him, and the views of the political party of the times. So, and maybe a lot of people. All right, more records here. Getting close to the end. October 2nd, 91. August 14th. This is mostly clerical stuff. This is interesting. It's a list of a bunch of addresses that Abbey lived at from 47 to 65. And this guy moved around. He's definitely the poor writer going from like government job to government job. And this reflects that. But if you're interested in the places he lived, well, during this time in his life, they're all here. Certified July 9th, 1965. So that's kind of cool. Information about his parents, family tree, and I think this is a list of like the files that are included from the file structure on him within the broader files that the FBI has on people. Whew, so that's that, 150 pages in about 30 minutes. That's all I got for you today. If you learned something from this, let me know in the comments below. If you think the FBI has more files on Edward Abbey that they haven't released, let me know. And if nothing else, thanks for watching. We'll see you around.